Good day and welcome. My name is Richard Gooden and I'm here on behalf of the South Carolina Tobacco Free Collaborative, and I welcome you to Part 6 of our Tobacco Cessation and Health Equity series. This webinar series has been a very robust and comprehensive collection of digital learning events, and today's event will be no different. Additionally, we invite you to connect with SCTFC at www.sctobaccofree.org. Again, that's www.sctobaccofree.org. And you could follow on Twitter at TobaccoFreeSC. That's at TobaccoFreeSC. And you would be using the hashtag SCTTobaccoFree. That's SCTobaccoFree. Second. So today's webinar is Passage of Smoke-Free Ordinances, a Collaborative Success. The mission for the mission of the South Carolina Tobacco Free Collaborative is to eliminate the toll of tobacco use by providing leadership, guidance, and resources to state and local partners. The South Carolina Tobacco Free Collaborative is a partnership with coalitions that are utilized to address local tobacco issues and promote positive public health policies at the community level. They do this by providing leadership, by facilitating meetings, by promoting opportunities, and to promote and support advocacy. A couple of housekeeping things. Participants' microphones are muted. So if you're a participant here and you are listening, your microphone will be muted. Please check your internet. In the far right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see the bars. If your bars are green, that means you have good internet, and that means you'll be able to follow us easily. Refer all tech issues and all tech questions to our tech support chat pod. Again, refer all tech issues to the tech support chat pod. And also refer all presenter questions to the presenter Q&A pod. Today's speakers are Dr. David Holcomb, who's the Regional Administrator and Medical Director at the Louisiana Office of Public Health, and Jennifer Gilchrist, who's the Regional Manager for the Louisiana Campaign for Tobacco-Free Living, a program of the Louisiana Cancer Research Center and the Louisiana Public Health Institute. This disclosure statement is in compliance with the ACCME guidelines, and the following speakers have no financial or other relationships with the manufacturers of any commercial services discussed in this educational activity. And they both concur to not having that. And the objectives for this webinar are to appraise the process of community coalition building, to discuss coalition actions intended to change policy, to evaluate the success and challenges of coalition action, to critique the successful policies which have been passed as a result of coalition actions of the Louisiana Campaign for Tobacco-Free Living of the Louisiana Office of Public Health, and to discuss the strategies for the evaluation of coalition actions. So, first up will be Dr. Holcomb, and he will introduce us to the first poll question.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. We're very pleased and honored to be representing Louisiana, and especially Central Louisiana. But I would like to know a little bit about who we're talking to. And it does make a difference because I think the approach in a large urban center is not necessarily the same as in a small rural center, and everything needs to be tailored. So the results are coming in, and most of you are in urbanized areas, but we have a fair representative of rural. There's been a big push to really include rural in all of this because the impact is sometimes greater there and the success is more difficult to attain. So we wanted also to know how long people have been working on this, and it looks like we've got a smattering there, but quite a few have been a year or less, and then we have some veterans down there at 6 years or more. So it's a lot of experience out there, but also some neophytes. So without further ado, we'll plunge in. I'm really not the focus of this because I will say right from the onset that the heavy lifting of this and the technical work on this was largely done by Jennifer Gilchrist and her associates, and I just played a supportive role, and which is important, but they really did the heavy lifting. But I thought it was important to get a little idea of where this all happened, because it is different depending on where you come from, and I think that's important. So we work closely with another organization called Well Ahead, which is from our Bureau of Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, and one of their focuses is healthy air. So I'm shamelessly borrowing some of their slides, and they are one of our collaborators at a state level. So people smoke too much here. Louisiana has a bunch of bad statistics, and this is one of them, that we exceed the national average, and this is terribly costly. We still have about 24% of adults who are smoking, and then 12% of high school, and 6.3% middle school, and about 7,000 people a year die from smoking attributable deaths. So it takes a huge economic and health toll on the citizenry, which is no news to anybody who's listening to this presentation. The taxpayers get stuck with $700 million a year, $433 per household, a huge amount, $523 million for Medicaid, $88 million for charitable partnerships, $85 million for state employees and retiree health benefits. This is a very costly problem, and it's all the more tragic because it's avoidable, because it's related to a voluntary activity. So Louisiana does have in the broader sense, a smoke-free air law, Act 815, passed in 2007, which was really a very important milestone in the fight against tobacco. It did not, however, prohibit smoking in gaming facilities or freestanding bars, which was an enormous problem. On the other hand, it did not also have preemption. And so it did not forbid local communities from passing laws that were stricter than the state law. And I know many people around the United States do not necessarily have that situation. And I'm sure you know which ones you are. So, smoke-free laws are a big hodgepodge all over the United States, and some are stricter than others, and there's a lot that are, a lot of municipalities. And so that's the context in which we were working on this, and we'll go into some of the details. So this started right here in Alexandria, Louisiana, for which I am terribly proud, and terribly proud of the people that are working on it. There were no municipality laws that were stricter. I mean, there were none. So Jennifer Gilchrist and her group started working well before 2012, and after a lot of work and a lot of hand-wringing and collaboration and presentations and everything you can think of, we managed to get the first smoke-free ordinance in the state passed in Alexandria, Louisiana. And Alexandria, Louisiana, the city itself is only 50,000. And our whole surrounding parish is only, parish is a county, only about 120,000, and the whole region is only 300,000. So this was a triumph in a fairly rural, very conservative area, and with no precedence in the state. Now, after that, it became progressively easier because Jennifer and her team knew what to do and how to approach this, and and she's going to explain all that because that's the nitty-gritty of how to get one of these things passed. But after that, it progressed around the state. That red line around the center, I call that the Jennifer Gilchrist effect because it's our major city, Alexandria, and then all these smaller communities, and really associated with the activities of a very small group of individuals. But it did extend very successfully around the state and added New Orleans in 2015, which was a triumph, and then Lafayette in 2017. These are the larger towns, and Baton Rouge in 2018 with a bunch of smaller municipalities in between. So once you can get it going, then your chances of having success in other cities is much, much greater because the precedent's been established. And this I'm just going to give you a little bit of demographic background because I think people who come from very disadvantaged areas think that, well, we're not going to be able to do this. We don't have the support. We don't have the educated citizenry. We don't have the necessary conditions. And I'll tell you, honestly, it can be done in Central Louisiana. It can be done any place. So this is what I kind of call the bad belt, and people have seen this. And this was from 2014, but it hasn't changed. And this was based on 6 criteria: college education, unemployment, obesity, income, life expectancy, and disability. And you can see that there's geographical concentrations of this up through Appalachia and then all across the Old South and then various other places in the United States. So you just have to look on the map and see if you're one of these zones. And when they rank all of these counties, 3,135 counties, all of our Central Louisiana counties, those are our parishes, the best one we have here is 2,000. It has a rank of 1,858. The worst one, 3,038. So this is not a privileged area, to say the least. In fact, Louisiana has been 49th, 47th, 48th, 50th since the inception of America's health rankings, and that goes back to 1990. And what's so disturbing is that it's been such a flat line. And we're hoping that this sort of local initiatives will actually help us to achieve, successes locally, which can translate into successes statewide. This is just the behavioral aspect of health rankings. Everybody knows this, and everybody knows how to use it. And here we are. We're 43rd of all the states in our smoking. Here's our parishes. The parishes are Central Louisiana, and we're smack dab in the center of the state. And this is just to give you an idea of where this is happening. The population is mostly concentrated in this narrow band that runs across 3 of the parishes, and the whole region only has 300,000 people in it. The density is highly variable, but Rapides is 99 and goes down to 14 in Catahoula, which means there's not a lot of people that live there, 10,000 people in the entire county. But that's the reality we live and work in. And then it is racially, there's mostly just black-white, very small Hispanic population, but the black population varies from 32% all the way down to only 11.9%, and the white population corresponding. And this makes a difference, too, in how you approach, because there were several questions about minorities and engaging minorities and so forth, and it does make a difference where you're working and about how you operate. And the Central Louisiana is a poor area. We have a 24,000 per capita income, which is half national average, and it's very unequally distributed across the parishes, and there's always very significant black-white differentials. So this is no different than many places in the Old South or wherever. So difficult population. Everybody's seen these maps. The problems are not equally distributed, and these are your health factors. If it's darker, it's worse, and of course you see that the health outcomes correspond roughly with the health factors, and which is not surprising. And then in our parishes, you're going to see this too in areas within larger cities or within and counties surrounding, metropolitan areas. There's a huge difference between the outcomes and factors between parishes. And so the higher it is, the worse it is. We're 34, you're 64 parishes, so if it's tall, it's bad. If it's low, it's good. Well, we have 3 sets of parishes here that are consistently have problems. We have 2 that are much better. Both of those have very low minority populations, and then we have a couple that are sort of in between. And then, of course, the health factors are similar, and that's no surprise. And all of you have done this. Anybody in public health has done this, have mapped your states and mapped your areas for concentrated disadvantage, because these areas are also going to have poorer health outcomes, tend to have higher tobacco use, and tend to have a lower educated population. And so within your districts, your counties, your states, there's going to be areas that are different than others and that are sometimes more difficult to achieve results. But when you combine these things, you can actually, the dark colors there are all, all these, the dark colors are where you have both 20%, over 20% poverty and 25%, over 25% without a high school education. So very, very challenging areas to work in. And then this is my last deal, and then I will pass it to my very qualified colleague, Jennifer Gilchrist. This is, social determinants all play a role in this. Health equity all plays a role in this. And we all know that your income, your educational level, and your social status are going to determine your health. And this is true for smoking, there's a tendency to smoke or not smoke, as well as heart disease, as well as cancer rates, as well as everything. And so that's just something that you're going to have to deal with and should deal with. So I think that's it for me, and I will pass it over to Jennifer to really tell you the nitty-gritty about how we got these ordinances achieved.
Thank you, Dr. Holcomb, and I need to sing your praises because you made me feel so good on this webinar. You have been an outstanding public health leader for us, and I will say at the outset of this that it is a collaboration, and that's what this is all about. If it weren't for him, we would not be able to have had as much success as we have had in our region. So thank you for that, Dr. Holcomb. We have a poll going right now. How long have you worked on smoke-free policy change? And now we're moving to what type of professional you are. So it seems to be that there is a lot of folks in public health, not so many medical, but that's okay, a lot in tobacco prevention and control. So we're glad that you're with us today. I don't know if we're still having numbers come in. It looks like we've wrapped that up. So everyone's in public health, and we're going to talk today about the collaborative process and how we did this not as 1 or 2 or 3 people, but as a community working together. And I would also like to thank the South Carolina Tobacco Free Collaborative for including us in this webinar series. We are honored to be here today and to introduce the group to rural Louisiana. And thank you, Dr. Holcomb, for doing that in such a wonderful way with all of your maps and your statistics. And I'm impressed with the use of the arrow. I won't be doing that. I'm more technologically challenged. So moving on to what we are here for today. This is our story in Central Louisiana of how we achieved the first comprehensive smoke-free municipality in the state. We plan to share our coalition building methods used for policy change, discuss challenges and obstacles we encountered in the policy change process and how we navigated those, and to share our post-implementation evaluation measures that we hope will be helpful to you. Also, I'd like to say that we did not do this on our own. We used toolkits, model policies, and assistance with ordinance language and resources. And those can be found at the 2 I have listed here. toolkits involving the Partnership for Prevention, as well as the Clearing the Air with the Americans for Non-Smokers' Rights. I may refer to them later as ANR, just for brevity. Also, the ANR has an excellent model smoke-free policy that is the industry standard, so to speak, so that link is also contained in this presentation. Furthermore, if you need strategic guidance on your campaign or consultation on a draft policy, the two resources that are very helpful are the American for Non-Smokers' Rights as well as the Tobacco Control Legal Consortium. This presentation shares information about the City of Alexandria, Louisiana smoke-free ordinance process of 2011. Our coalition team included a Louisiana Campaign for Tobacco-Free Living staff lobbyist who advised and worked with our local coalition as well as our statewide tobacco-free coalition. Let's see, I'm having trouble advancing here. There we go. There we go, thank you. Okay, so let's get started. I want to say on the outset that this process is going to be showing up sequentially. However, you know, sometimes things change and you bounce around a little bit, so it's not written in stone, but we're going to follow the process that we pretty much were on, and know that your community may look different and it may follow and flow in a different way. So the first thing and the great way to get started is to conduct a community assessment. Dr. Holcomb mentioned our State Smoke-Free Air Act, which covers most public spaces for no smoking, but it did exempt freestanding bars and gaming facilities. Thankfully, they repealed preemption, which allows us to strengthen this law at the local level. And that's the work that we do in Central Louisiana on smoke-free air. Also, it's important to know your local policymaking process. How is a policy introduced? Does it lay over for a couple of weeks before it is voted on? Does it have to go through committee? Understand that process and find out what that is. Create policymaker profiles. This is important to know what those policymakers find as their pet projects. Who do they listen to? Who can speak to them? And that helps you know the best way for your coalition members to be of help as door openers and connectors. Also, investigate your local political climate. We have right now elections coming up in November, and so right now any work that's being done is kind of in a holding pattern where we spend a lot of time on community education simply because no one wants to go into a hot topic vote before an election. Does your community have any smoke-free parks or gaming facilities? Smoke-free parks or recreation areas. Sometimes the community will do that first before they consider comprehensive smoke-free air in all workplaces. Are there any bars and gaming facilities? For us, that was important since those were the exemptions. And are any of those smoke-free? And has any other smoke-free policy been attempted in your community? All of this is very helpful to know. Next, we would organize resources. Do you have an existing coalition? Thankfully, we did. It was the Region 6 Tobacco Prevention and Cancer Control Coalition at the time. So we all worked within this coalition as a subcommittee on our educational for smoke-free air. If not, you can pull together key players to create one. And again, I mentioned that we had a staff lobbyist throughout our process on TFL staff. If your coalition members have restrictions on lobbying, then you might want to consider engaging the national organizations such as American Cancer Society, Cancer Action Network, American Heart, American Lung, and Americans for Non-Smokers' Rights. They do provide assistance if you need those. Also, who are your needed voices? Who are the leaders in community? Who make a difference? Who do people listen to? With materials and resources, I made reference to those a little bit earlier. And also consider finances and any evaluation measures that you will use. Next, we engage key partners and stakeholders. We have the obvious health partners at the national level, such as American Heart, American Cancer, and American Lung Association. But you also need to consider your local partners. For us, of course, Dr. Holcomb, it's you at the Office of Public Health. We also had other physicians that were interested in being involved in this process. Some of our oncologists at our cancer centers and our hospitals were supportive as well. Youth, we had a great set of youth that were involved in a health initiative locally at one of our high schools, and they approached us and said, how can we be involved to help with educating the public with smoke-free air? And what they chose to do was to take to their high school football games on a Friday night and go through the stands and educate people on the importance of smoke-free air for all, and they had a petition that people could sign in support of smoke-free air, and they gathered those for us. So we really appreciated the youth involvement, and to see them speaking out was very heartwarming and helpful. Cancer survivors are very helpful as well. We had the American Cancer Society help us with that, and I have to say that during testimony, during the vote, our cancer survivors were some of the most persuasive and important and key speakers for us during that time. Also critical are your infected employees, and for us it was bar owners and gaming and bingo hall managers, but we also included a lot of our musicians and as well as DJs. People forget DJs are also in these environments. Business leaders, those can be coming from your civic clubs and your Rotary clubs or anyone that is very outstanding in your community. And of course, our expert testimony coming from our physicians. Dr. Holcomb, I will say, is one of our outstanding state leads in that he will come and speak to the public health issue of secondhand smoke. Your national organizations, as I mentioned earlier, could also participate. And we found local sororities and fraternities for adults very, very helpful to our process. Oops, let's see. I keep hitting the wrong button here. Sorry about that. Let me back up, make sure I didn't miss anybody. Okay. Form and activate your coalition. And again, it may look different from ours. We actually had a small group. It doesn't have to be large to be successful. I like to think of it as like an onion with layers. We had a core of several people that were there on the day-to-day and the week-to-week activities, and then you had another layer of people that would be available to you that would be helpful later on, such as your doctors and your expert testimony. It's important that you have an agreement on your goals, which is comprehensive smoke-free air for all, form a database of your supporters, and determine evaluation measures. For us, it was helpful to reflect on our success for future ordinance efforts. And again, consider your national partners or your regional representatives for American Cancer, American Heart, American Lung for technical assistance with process language and any lobbying. Dr. Holcomb, will you help me advance?
Yes, just tell me. Oops, got it. Just tell me, I'll go ahead. Just let me know.
Yes, I'm having trouble with my arrows here at the bottom. Okay, thank you. Next, we have educate the community on secondhand smoke to lay the groundwork for change. It is really important to educate policymakers and the general public on the hazards of secondhand smoke, the benefits of smoke-free environments, evidence-based public health interventions to reduce secondhand exposure. These are public health issues, and these are important for public health to educate the community. We target education toward the community, media, stakeholders, policymakers, key leaders, civic groups, and other influential community organizations. We promote protection of employees' health and their right to work in a healthy smoke-free environment. Next. Our focus is on policymaker education on documented dangers of secondhand smoke and data that show that smoke-free policies do not negatively impact the economy. We generated a lot of earned and paid media, primarily through letters to the editor, radio talk shows, and through press conferences. We shared air quality monitoring results in a press conference which actually launched our campaign. I'll get to that more in just a minute. We scheduled speaking engagements at Rotary clubs, civic organizations, any place where you can get folks together to listen, to stimulate that grassroots support is important. We also held smoke-free bar or gaming events. One of the fun ones we had was Chubby Carrier is a Louisiana Zydeco player, and he had received a Grammy award in the area of Zydeco music, and was a huge support, and still is a huge supporter of smoke-free air in Louisiana. And he agreed to come up and hold a meet and greet with his Grammy, and folks would come and take pictures with him, and we were able to educate. Actually, he educated them on the importance of smoke-free air wherever you work, and it was one of our most fun and exciting events that we held. Also, we found now and still, and back then, that it was very helpful to piggyback onto larger and successful community events. You've got a built-in crowd already, and you can work with partners such as American Cancer at Relay for Life, or American Heart during their walk, or any festivals that may be going on in the community. If you have funds, it's fun to consider collateral with smoke-free messaging. We've used car magnets and stickers during our meetings, of course T-shirts, which gives you a color type campaign, pins, napkins, koozies. It's important to be seen everywhere. We covered our campaign probably from the air quality monitoring, which was the launch that occurred in March, all the way through up to vote in September. So it was very heavy duty community education for about 7 months.
Next.
Yes. I wanted to share with you some information, some visuals actually, on some things that we did, because I think it's one thing to hear us talk about what we did, but here's some things I'd like to share with you so you can see what we did. We had an awesome billboard campaign, and I still to this day love this campaign. We made a call out for local persons that were anyone that wanted to participate in support of smoke-free air to come out to a photo shoot. So we had 2 council members, we had some musicians, we had bartenders, we had bar owners, and what we did is we took their pictures, and then they went up on billboards around the city so that they were local faces and familiar faces to the community, and they could see that they supported smoke-free air. So it was a very, very clever way. Our media communications department did a great job. Of course, we are in Louisiana, and we Mardi Gras here, so beads are important to us, and that is one of the collateral that we used during our campaign was smoke-free for all Mardi Gras beads, which everyone loves to get things like that. And our campaign symbol then in 2011 and still today is the asterisk, meaning there is an exception. There are people that work in bars, freestanding bars, and gaming facilities who are left out from the coverages of the Smoke-Free Air Act, and we want those exemptions closed. Next is some more visuals for you to see and to look at what we did locally. Our air quality monitoring press conference was held in March, and this is done after we had air quality monitoring results analyzed by the LSU Health Sciences School of Public Health. And what we did was share with the community that at that point, after 17 bars were monitored, there was particulate matter at the hazardous level. And I call this our Houston, we have a problem type moment, when we could actually launch into the fact that we have an issue in these settings with the dangers of secondhand smoke, and we need to look at protecting those people. Also, I have the Louisiana Municipal Association conference picture here. I just got back from the one we have this year yesterday. So this is a great opportunity for us to share the importance of healthier air for all in all workplaces. Our mayors and council members across the state attend this conference, and it gives us an excellent time to reach out to them and educate. And one of the piggyback community events that we've done is with American Cancer Society Relay for Life. They had a band playing, and they were so excited that we protect and support musicians in their workplace from secondhand smoke. And one of the musicians happened to be a cancer survivor, so he was awesome as speaking out from the stage on the dangers of secondhand smoke and how he appreciates being able to play in a smoke-free venue. Next slide. Next slide, Dr. Holcomb. Thank you. Next, we assess our level of support. This can be done through polls, surveys. We use supporter cards. There's also smoke-free resolutions. There's all kinds of different ways to do that. But mostly, I encourage everyone to listen and monitor your media and ask questions. Whenever there's a campaign with a lot of discussion of protection of others from secondhand smoke, the Town Talk, our newspaper, picked up on that, and they did an informal poll on their Facebook page and on their online website. So it's important to monitor these, and that's a great time to activate your grassroots to respond and to encourage others to respond in support of healthier air for all. And community readiness is critical. It's important to continually assess that. And if the support is not there at the grassroots level, it may be prudent to either slow down or postpone your efforts and focus on education until the community is ready to support this initiative. A policy change will create a new norm, and it is very challenging to some people in the community. So I will say that your best chance of success is not only decision maker support, but grassroots is critical as well. Next slide. We identify a champion at this point who will sponsor the ordinance itself, and your ideal candidate should have leadership, influence, passion, expertise, history of passing successful measures, and also share your goal that comprehensive smoke-free environments are important for every person in every workplace. You would meet regularly to stay on point and make sure that things are going smoothly. Our champion during Alexandria, his name is Roosevelt Johnson. He's still currently on the council and is president of the council. And he participated in our billboard campaign that I showed you earlier. He also participated in some of our early coalition statewide strategic meetings around healthier air for all. He was sitting president council at that time as well, so he's got longevity now on the council. So that made it very easy for him to control and direct the process of what goes on during the day of the vote. He was and still is very passionate about healthy communities, and to his credit, he still advocates for 100% smoke-free municipalities and has traveled all over the state to support all of those other municipalities that have become smoke-free as well. And believe me, he is not finished yet. We have 7 municipalities in central Louisiana, and he is ready to help and is so supportive to work on those. So between him and Dr. Holcomb, we have an outstanding team along with our coalition members that support us. Next slide. The ordinance itself, like I said, a model is available on the Americans for Non-Smokers' Rights website. Many municipalities will request a model or some type of template, and so you can share that there is a model available on this website. Also, since we have had subsequent ordinances passed in our community, a lot of our smaller communities will ask for the ordinance that was passed by a neighboring community of similar size, and we'll use that. And thankfully, ours are good, strong policies. So the mayors then talk to each other, and they kind of, support each other and move through the process talking with each other. It's important to know what your deal breakers are, what your non-negotiables are, and when you do start with a very tight, comprehensive model, it does leave room for negotiation if any of your council believes that they need to allow for that during the policy-making process. Next slide. It's important to know the characteristics of an effective smoke-free policy. That would mean 100% smoke-free environments in clearly defined terms to ensure easy and unambiguous interpretation. That means your language is strong. Minimal exceptions that would undermine public health protections, a clear rationale within the ordinance citing documentation why what the data is support for secondhand protection from secondhand smoke, and you need to outline the method of enforcement. Next page. It's also important to note any exceptions that someone would try to slip in that undermine effective smoke-free policy. And the typical ones that show up are after hours exception, minors exception, hardship exception, and ventilation exception. So those definitions are on the slide. You can look through those to know what those are. Next slide. And then it's important for the upcoming vote, once an ordinance has been introduced, to generate support for smoke-free air. You would provide educational materials to policymakers. We created packets, and they also allowed us to present educational information during committee meeting on the day of the vote. You enlist help from influential business leaders, and check in regularly with your policymakers to determine where they are. I will say that Mr. Johnson, who is our City Council president and champion of that ordinance, did that for us. He kept a very close communication going with the other council members to know where they stood, what their concerns were, and if we could address that with educational materials. And somewhere along the way, if you find that your support is insufficient, it may be prudent to go ahead and postpone the process and continue with education efforts. Municipalities would like to be sure to help with implementation, and we found this really, really important with our smaller communities that don't have much of a budget. And we were able to help them with downloadable and printable PDFs noting smoke-free footage from doorways. It cites their ordinance number, and also we provided help with smoke-free park signage. And most of all, prepare for opposition. I will say Dr. Holcomb is a rock star, because during the public health public hearing that we had before the Alexandria Ordinance, he took some pretty hard criticism and questions. But more than anything, I also want to say, not only do you need to be prepared for pushback from your bar owners, your vaping community, and your gaming industry, but prepare the coalition members. One of our coalition members, who actually is a radio personality and has a talk show, who was our MC during the air quality monitoring event, was not prepared for the strong language, sometimes contentious and disrespectful words and behavior that can happen when people are upset during town halls and public discourses surrounding smoke-free air. And it really bothered her, and to this day she still talks about it. Whenever I visit her radio program again, she'll bring up how that was so disturbing to her. So I think it's really important for your coalition members to kind of be prepared that sometimes, but not always, it could be a contentious process. And the best advice when there is opposition is to not react, and stay calm and self-contained, and keep repeating your public health talking points. Next slide. Mobilizing your coalition for grassroots support. We did this actually through a type of phone tree where we had our core, like I said earlier, that onion layer of our coalition members, who then would agree to make phone calls to 5 other people and kind of activate it's time to write letters or send emails or make some or show up for public health, public hearings or for the vote itself. And this was a great way for us to activate the many people that we have in support of healthier air for all. And again, that's to show up for your public hearings, to be a visual support. And if you can't afford t-shirts, just wearing a certain color shirt is a way for the voters of the council to look out and see, oh, there's a lot of blue out there, or if you choose black, there's a lot of black t-shirts out there, or black color. So then they know the number of supporters just through a visual of who's in the room. Line up your supportive testimony. What a lot of council members said they don't like to hear is the same thing over and over again from 4 or 5 different people. So you have someone address the health concerns, and you don't need 20 people to do that, just a few strategic folks from maybe different perspectives, as well as people who work in bars or gaming facilities. Let them know the protocol, how long they're allowed to speak. A lot of them have time limit, especially if there's a lot of testimony coming from both sides. And who will be your spokesperson for media interviews? That's important to distinguish as well. And we, of course, had an excellent media and communications department that helped prepare talking points. If you don't have those surrounding secondhand smoke, you can usually find those from the CDC website or sometimes from your Office of Public Health. Thank you. Next. Measures to use for successful outcomes. Phone calls, letters of support. We had a smoke-free resolution, smoke-free petitions, supporter cards. Verify with your champion characteristics of smoke-free policy as well as exceptions that undermine. We went over those earlier, the importance of effective smoke-free policy as well as things that we don't want to see in there. And remember that success can sometimes be postponement or tabling of an ordinance with incomplete, weak, or ambiguous language. I will say that at the time of vote, everything lies in the hands of your champion, because once that meeting starts and the process begins, it's up to your champion to guide the process. And if something happens along the way where some of these, let's say, for instance, exceptions that undermine are introduced, if he has no way of completely keeping that out, it may be that a tabling or a postponement would be necessary so that that language and that exception is not introduced, creating ineffective policy. And we did have a successful outcome during our vote. I will say that one of the most riveting and important testimonies was from our cancer survivors during the Alexandria vote. And one of our council members was staunchly in opposition going in, and we didn't expect a yes vote for him. And what happened is he received a phone call from his wife. This is almost a unbelievable story, to tell you the truth. During the council vote itself, where one of their friends had just passed from cancer. And after hearing all of the cancer testimony from our survivors and what it did to them and how it was in their life, and they're begging the council members to consider smoke-free air for all, he was the first vote out of the gate, and it was yes, and it was in honor of his friend that he lost to cancer. And then all of subsequent votes were yes, and they voted in honor of someone lost to cancer. So that is our exciting success story. And we had a unanimous passage of smoke-free air in Alexandria in 2011. Next slide. So once you have your success, you're ready to celebrate. And it's important to publicly thank all your policymakers who voted in favor of the ordinance. It was a rough road for them, so it really is important to appreciate them and let them know that we are thankful that they supported healthier air and smoke-free air for all. That can be done through a reception or a celebration, and we've chosen Region 6 to hand out smoke-free recognition awards, and we have pictures of that below so you can see the fun stuff. We have our asterisk, which is our campaign symbol to not leave anyone out, on our pedophores, which is our sweet little cakes that we love here in the South. And then the middle picture to the left is our ordinance champion, Roosevelt Johnson. In the middle is our Director of Tobacco-Free Living, Louisiana Campaign for Tobacco-Free Living, Tanya Moore. And to the right, holding the trophy, is the Mayor of Alexandria, Jacques Roy. And then some council members. And you can see a little bit of me behind Roosevelt and a little bit of Dr. Holcomb behind the trophy. So we were both there too as well. And of course, they proudly display their first municipality in Louisiana to become 100% smoke-free in the City Council room with all of their other awards. Next slide. And even though success has been achieved, implementation is also extremely critical and not to be forgotten throughout this process. It is outlined in the ordinance according to how policymakers chose to lay that out. And one of the most important things about healthier air or smoke-free laws is self-enforcement. That's usually when the public helps educate each other. For instance, you're at the ballpark and they're newly smoke-free and you're watching your son or your grandson play t-ball and the person next to you lights up. If there is proper and effective signage and enough signage put up at those ballparks that they are smoke-free, you are free to then look at the person and say, "Excuse me, ma'am, I'm sorry, I don't know if you realize, but this is now a smoke-free park. Thank you for extinguishing." And we call that self-enforcement, and that begins to happen once you have good signage throughout the community. This could be done through media outreach. We had this campaign, or these are our billboards actually at the bottom from our Media and Communications Department, one addressing bars with clean air and cold drinks coming up now, as well as the gaming with the note of the bingo halls. These were on billboards. These were in our newspaper as well as our magazine that everyone looks at called Sin-Law Focus, and we also had radio outreach happening to educate the community about the new smoke-free air coming into the city January 1st, 2012. Also, it may be good to include the smoke-free policy and applications for business licenses, and do not forget to share tobacco cessation resources. We have our 1-800-QUIT-NOW number, and we made sure that everyone received information on how to quit. And of course, remain vigilant. This is a time when opposition can come in to try to overturn or reintroduce and weaken policy. So we always pay attention to what's going on, even to this day. Next slide. The evaluation measures that we used were our air quality monitoring in the bars. As I mentioned, we did air quality monitoring in January and February of 2011, and that's when we had our press conference saying, our Houston, we have a problem moment, where the level was at hazardous area, the particulate matter was at hazardous levels. So you can see where that is in the big red line. Then we did post-ordinance bar monitoring 1 week after implementation. So the ordinance went into effect on January 1st of 2012, and we did this by Friday or that weekend, and it moved from hazardous to almost the same as outdoor air. And this is a very compelling slide. Even just this chart's enough. I remember Dr. Holcomb participated in the post-ordinance press conference, and he said, it kind of speaks for itself. It's right here. Red is bad, and down here, green is good. So we were very happy to have such excellent measures to share with our community to show that we are now protecting our community from the dangers of secondhand smoke. Next slide. Of two other evaluation measures, one that we're using more now is to calculate the population covered by comprehensive smoke-free policy. So that's done through knowing the population of the community and then adding those up to see comprehensively how many people are being covered. So currently in the state of Louisiana, we have 16 comprehensive ordinances, and that's covering 20% of Louisiana residents. We also had a study conducted in October of 2012, which was the impact of Louisiana's Smoke-Free Air Act on the hospitality industry or hospitality employment. And I put a link down there for that if you would like to look at that a little bit more closely. But what we found is that the current study underscores that expanding the reach of the Louisiana Smoke-Free Air Act to bars and nightclubs will have no impact on employment in these venues. One of the very first questions that everyone hears is, it's going to close my business, or how's this going to impact the economy? And so this measure is very helpful to us to show that the state law did not negatively impact the hospitality industry as everyone was so worried would happen. Next slide. So our story continues. Again, I mentioned since Alexandria, we have had 6 more municipalities choose to go 100% smoke-free, and we are very, very thankful for them. They range from small towns to villages, which is extremely rural. So that covers, you know, a lot of the type of municipalities that we have in central Louisiana. Next slide. And we hope to have many more successes together between Mr. Johnson and Dr. Holcomb and our coalition. Together we work. This was a total collaboration. This was never done in a vacuum and never done by just 2 or 3 people. And we are very proud of the work that we do in Central Louisiana. And thank you for being with us today to listen to our story, and hope that it helps you in some way with the work that you do locally. Next slide. And I guess we're at discussion questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jennifer, and Dr. Holcomb, for a great presentation. I also love the collaborative nature in which you guys have worked together in. So this will be very fruitful as it relates to answering the questions that are going to be presented by our attendees. The first question actually comes from me. Can you talk a little bit about the size of your team and the number of people you work with on a day-to-day basis, just to put in context what you've been able to achieve and who you've been able to achieve it with, along with obviously the coalitions that you're working with?
Okay, I'll take that one, Dr. Holcomb. We have now a new name for our coalition. It's called the Central Louisiana Healthy Communities Coalition. We actually have these statewide in all our regions. Our core group is probably at our meetings anywhere from 8 to 10 people, but when we get activated, it could be more like 15 to 20. And I will say that we have another coalition that exists in Central Louisiana called the Rapides Healthy Initiatives Coalition, and that has another, it bleeds over a little bit, we cross-sector a little bit, but those folks have about 30. But again, this is what I like to talk about, the onion effect. Those of us in core doing work is not that large, but when we need our help, we do have community members that we can turn to.
Well, the only thing I'd add there is that we have a regionalized public health system, and so every region has a administrator, medical director, and those folks, like myself, are quite attached to the communities and know the players and work with the organizations, and so that amplifies the effect of the healthy communities.
Great. Just want to remind everyone who's online right now that the PowerPoint presentation can be downloaded in the lower left-hand corner. Smoke-free ordinance is a tag on that one, and then also we've, as we do for all of these webinars, we have a collection of resources that can be downloaded. Many of these resources are around the building of coalitions, and those are also on the in a central portion of the page, and you could download those straight from this site. First question from Susan Kaler. She asks, were you able to pay for your lobbyist?
You want me to take that one, Dr. Holcomb?
Yes, because you know and I don't.
Okay. Our lobbyists that assisted us throughout our process was a member of our Louisiana Campaign for Tobacco-Free Living staff. So we actually were fortunate to have someone in our staff that could do that. The ones that are available through American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, I do not believe, but I am not entirely sure, that they require payment. I think there's no charge for that.
Next.
The only supplement to that, no, I just wanted to say that as a civil servant, you know, that works for the state, I cannot support specific legislation. So you have to have an expert witness sort of role if you're actually in public health in a public health official capacity.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Next question is from Megan Moore. Did these ordinances target just cigarette smoke or vapor products as well?
Well, I'll tell you what. The Alexandria Ordinance was passed in 2011, and vaping devices or electronic nicotine delivery systems were just coming out. They weren't even included in the Smoke-Free Air Act of 2007 because they didn't exist. So it was a very new product when we worked on the Alexandria Ordinance, and our council and all of the policymakers chose not to involve or add electronic devices simply because they were waiting for more data to come out about it, even though we encouraged comprehensive. Now, the subsequent ordinances that have passed in Region 6 do include vaping devices because more and more science has come out and people know that there is not any beneficial science that we can find to using those devices.
So let me add to that question. How has the addition of vaping impacted the work that you do generally? Has it, I mean, I guess clearly it must expand your work, or can you talk a little bit about the addition to vaping?
Vaping is we're learning more and more and new things every day, but what I will say is that what we have observed in testimony, especially in some of the larger cities that have gone on, like New Orleans and Baton Rouge, is that they consider themselves almost a separate community and don't necessarily identify with those that use tobacco. And so they want to be exempted a lot from indoor air policy. Of course, best policy and what we have reiterated in this PowerPoint is that comprehensive coverage is best.
Okay. This question is from Nicole Alberti. What activities did you engage sorority and fraternity members in?
Jennifer, this community only has one small university, and the actual formal university-related communities and fraternities is a very small group. And I think you're talking more about the citizen groups and the alumni sororities, etc.
Exactly. I am talking about like Alpha Kappa Alpha and some of the adult sorority and fraternities that a lot of community members stay very involved with and engaged with throughout their adult life. That's the group that we primarily engaged, and they would hold, to ask what kind of activities we had, they would hold speaking engagements, you know, how you talk to different groups, and they also helped us in showing up as a grassroots support for any kind of press conference or rally or other events that we hold in the community. So that's how they supported smoke-free air for all at a grassroots level.
This next question is from Richard Nunez. The air quality monitoring took place inside a bar or on a bar dining patio? Wow.
Inside the bar. We had the side pack that we would bring in, and we would stay in the facility or in the bar, inside the bar, for the required amount of time, enough for the air quality to be registered, and then those were collected and evaluated, and then the information was given to us in a report. Okay.
This next question is from Ian Hamilton. Some counties/regions have regular meetings for political leaders in and around the jurisdiction. A mayor's council is an example. this could be one opportunity to educate policymakers for multiple jurisdictions at once. I didn't get a question from you.
Well, I can actually address that because what we do here is the county health rankings. You know, some of the statistics I showed were from the county health rankings, and we actually present those annually for stakeholders, interested politicians, and other community individuals, and that's done every year. So there's a few high points on that, and of course smoking's one of them, and in Louisiana we also have STD problems and a number of other health issues, and that's a good opportunity to bring those to the forefront.
Absolutely, and we have had our sheriff attend, we've had council members attend, we've had our mayors attend, so any kind of public forum where you educate is awesome and a great way to get the message out.
Sarah Mendez asks, I think this is a great question, who conducted the air quality monitoring and how was that funded?
The funding question, I do not know that I can answer that because that was organized and facilitated with state leadership for the Louisiana Campaign for Tobacco-Free Living. But I will say that our partner in that was the LSU Health Sciences School of Public Health.
Okay. And how long did that process take to monitor the air and provide you back information on the overall quality?
We did air quality monitoring in January and February of 2011, and we needed to do it primarily on the weekend, of course, because that's when most of the bars were open. And it took us a while because we did 17 of them, so we did it over a period of time. And then afterwards, for post air quality monitoring, we did that in a very intense weekend when we had a lot of out-of-town staff come in and make a full sweep so we could knock it out in a weekend. We didn't have a lot of bars, not like we're New Orleans or someplace large where they had tons and tons of bars. We only had about 15 to 17.
Another question, how do you maintain records for all of the work that you do? And that question kind of goes to both of you actually, because you're both involved in this at different levels. How do you maintain the records?
Right. Go ahead, Dr. Holcomb.
Well, my situation is a bit different because this is one of many, many activities. And so what I do is when I go to specific meetings or I do the county health rankings or other kinds of official presentations or even smaller ones, I keep track of all that. But it's not for payment purposes. It's mostly for recognition of work purposes. But I just track it regularly. Jennifer, that's her whole job, so I don't know how you do that.
Dr. Holcomb's an excellent record keeper. He does an article every month and does all kinds of articles regularly for our local paper, and he's got this awesome 3-ring binder where he has every single one of them. So you need something, he keeps great records. But I keep personal files in my computer. There's no other reporting that I necessarily have to do. It's our record keeping, and we keep that, of course, on a server with our organization so that those are not lost in any way and can be transferred should I go on to do something else one day and someone needs those records, and they will be available and those files are there.
Great. Now, I know we speak of coalitions and we talk about them, in terms of getting as many people involved as possible. Is there like a magic number, or is there a number that you keep in your mind of, okay, we're kind of reaching a threshold of the amount of people that we could really keep engaged and track and follow? Is there a number of, what's kind of caps out a coalition maybe in a rural community in comparison to maybe an urban community?
I would say it really just depends because each community is different. If you're in a small community, for instance, There's one, Colfax, Louisiana, where we did some work. There is a coalition there. It's a parish coalition, actually. And there were 2 or 3 people that got engaged with the process and showed up at the council meeting and participated when they went for their smoke-free vote. So for that size community, which I'm not exactly sure how large they are, they're under they're somewhere between probably 2,000 and 5,000 people, maybe. That's all you're going to get. But Alexandria was larger, with 50,000, of course, and so having a core group working of 12 to 15 people may be sufficient. So I don't know that there's a magic number. It's really what works for you and what's going to get the job done.
And what would you say is the secret in gaining new coalition members? Is there a trick to getting people involved in it?
That's always tricky. Not tricky, but just, some people have a lot of work responsibilities, and this is usually seen as additional interest for them. And so unless it's part of their job where they need to participate in a lot of external, based on the networking that you get from that, not everybody wants to put in their time. But like I said, they may be willing to come testify or be a grassroots supporter on a day of a vote. So you kind of have to gauge what level of interest they have in being involved. We recruit all the time, just through conversations. We're out in the community, community-based, networking constantly, attending meetings, meeting new people, and always opening the door for them to join the coalition. I just met with someone just this last week, and she's new to the community, and I said, I'll add you to our coalition, and you're free to come and join and be involved with us. And we also have a way for a conference call line so that people that don't need to step away from their office can still be engaged with what we're doing. And I would say that's a great thing if you can. We use a free conference line for free, so it's no cost involved, and it really helps with keeping some people involved when they can't get away from their office.
And you have a little core that's of folks that are well-informed and enthusiastic and organized, and then you have folks in the periphery, and just as Jennifer said, everybody can contribute something. It's just some people have limitations on their time and so forth. So, but I don't really think there is a magic number. It's really dependent on the individuals.
Great. You both can answer this question. What challenges have you seen when collaborating with community coalitions for the purpose of passing smoke-free policies?
Well, our Healthy Communities Coalition has been the core of this, so there was no conflict there. And the opposition to these things is generally not terribly well organized, at least not in our area. So you had sporadic bar owners and libertarians and other folks that just don't want any kind of regulation. But those groups were not, in my experience, were not terribly well organized. They were sometimes very vocal, but not terribly organized.
Right. And everyone says what's so great about Region 6, what happens there that's so unique and so wonderful that y'all have had some wonderful successes. It's because we don't have any spirit of competition, which I think sometimes that question may be coming from, how is it hard to work with other coalitions? We don't have that. There is another coalition, like I mentioned earlier, in Alexandria in particular. It's a Rapides Parish Healthy Initiatives Coalition with some of the same members, but also some other different members. There's no we work together well. We play good in the sandbox together, and so we find our common purpose and we work together. And that's our strength. And I would say that if there's one thing that we have in our favor, we've always said, and I think Dr. Holcomb, you'll agree with me, that that's our strong suit.
I agree, and it spills over to other domains too that are not necessarily related to this. We have a disaster preparedness network, and that has the same collaborative qualities to it, simply because the individuals have goodwill and are willing and able to work together with minimal friction. And that's sometimes not so easy, but it's really a secret to success.
Great. Just a reminder that many of our participants are on the front lines doing a lot of this work, and one of the questions that kind of resonated with me is, what is a reasonable timeline for getting resolutions or policies changed in a locale? So, you know, they may be working on something for weeks, months, years. Can you give them an idea of maybe, you know, what a reasonable timeline is for seeing that type of policy change?
I'd say, again, it's kind of like the constitution of a coalition question. It just depends. For instance, in Alexandria, we kicked off this campaign strong and hard with the Air Quality Monitoring Press Conference, Houston, We Have a Problem. That was in March of 2011. The vote occurred in October 4th, 2011. So what is that, a 7 to 8 month process? And in that, it was extremely intense. But it didn't start on March 2011. It started probably several months before that. I know that for sure. So I would say the process for Alexandria was definitely over a year. You go to a smaller municipality where things move quicker, it could go faster, but then it could also be delayed because of strife within a council. I mean, there are so many variables, and it's really important to just keep a pulse on the process and constantly evaluate, constantly assess to determine its timing, when's the right time. And I wouldn't push something before it's ready. That grassroots has to be in place, that support at the community level, even though you may have council saying we'll do it, just so that you assure a smooth and successful process.
It can take years, and there's cities, the municipalities that Jennifer's been working on for literally years. And they'll move 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So you can't be discouraged, you know, because there is no magic timeline. In the best of circumstances, probably a year or less. In the worst of circumstances, several years.
They do not happen quickly. And I just because I showed a 7-month timeline, there was so much work on preceding that. And like Dr. Holcomb said, there is one that's really tough. We got so far, and then we had to pull it because it was not moving forward in a successful manner, and go back and re-educate and continue the education.
Richard Nunez asks, was there trouble getting bar owners' approval to do quality air control, to do air quality measurements, and were they aware of what you were looking for?
Yeah. They didn't know. The air quality side packs are a little device. I don't know if y'all can see my hands. They're about that big. So they fit real nicely into your purse. And then the measurer had to kind of stick out a little bit so it could detect the air. So they weren't aware. We walked in and did what we needed to do. And
so this was like a Mission Impossible thing. You guys had to kind of sneak out.
Yes. We had fun.
Didn't require HIPAA. Not covered by HIPAA.
What is the most significant challenge for those large communities when it comes to building capacity? I may be reading this question wrong. What is the most significant challenge that large communities face when building capacity?
Well, we don't really know that one because we're not really large. We're at 50, but I know that speaking with other managers on our staff who cover larger municipalities, I think that it's using your network, and those coalition members become critical as far as having connectors and door openers that they can access. And then once you know how to use those, then I think you're able to reach and build capacity for your particular process that you're moving forward in, whether it's smoke-free or other.
And I would suspect that a larger municipality, you're just increasing the number of players, and you're increasing the complexity of the issues, and so I would anticipate that that would be a more difficult process and might take longer. Maybe not, but I would.
Well, a good segue into that is, how do coalitions include social determinants of health in the conversation to change tobacco policies?
Oh, he's the expert. You take it.
Well, I'm not so sure I'm an expert, but the social determinants of health, they affect everything. I mean, so you can't separate that from any kind of health outcomes, health factors, or health policy. And so I think you have to fundamentally have understood the dynamic there and the relationship between poverty and low educational level and low socioeconomic level before you even go anywhere, because that dynamic is going to influence your entire dialogue. So it sometimes makes it more difficult because there were several questions about how do you engage African American communities or minority communities, and that's a difficult deal. You do have to engage them, but then again, those communities may not be the same people that have the political clout to pass legislation. So you cannot ever forget it. You always have to bring it in, and you always have to have that in the background of whatever issue you're addressing, whether it's STDs or infant mortality or smoking cessation. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it's critical.
Okay, no, I think that definitely does answer the question. This next one is directed to Dr. Holcomb also. How can we best encourage tobacco control with legislators who are of the libertarian mindset and feel everyone has the right to choose whether or not to use tobacco?
Well, this is a constant debate, whether it's talking about gun control or tobacco or whatever. And I think ultimately it's the price that the society has to pay. So if the individual is going to engage in unhealthy behavior that results in their premature death, that is one thing. But that the society as a whole is going to have to pay for that with prolonged treatments for COPD or lung cancer or heart attacks or heart failure. So I think ultimately it's going to become an economic issue. And I think libertarians are very interested in economics as well, and I think that's the only way that you can approach that. Your freedom ends where it impinges on the freedom of others. In this case, it's the freedom of the entire society to allocate more resources to other destinations.
Great. This is a question, I know Jennifer kind of touched on this before, but what is the best way for academia to come alongside community-based initiatives? So how do you activate and utilize academia to work for your causes?
Well, of course, we had Dr. Holcomb. We consider that academic, having our Office of Public Health and the statistics and the information that they have, and to do that public health education piece around secondhand smoke. Also, at the time, we had a college initiative going on our local campus, LSU Alexandria. They had a initiative to go 100% tobacco-free on the campus, which actually happened by state law, smoke-free later. But that we had them involved with our policy change process, and they were alongside us as well to give their input and to engage those college-age students in this process.
Well, we don't have large academic institutions here. We have one small, almost commuter campus of 3,000 students in a small Baptist school. Mm-hmm. So we don't have a Harvard, Stanford, Tulane, whatever. But I think it's important to engage those folks, and I think that's part of the the larger picture of including hospital systems and academia in the life of the community, and that community perspective is being pushed by CMS reimbursements and a lot of other things. And so I think you have to really work on that in any way you can, that these institutions are not independent of the communities they live in. And sometimes they're in the middle of, you have a distinguished institution that's practically in the middle of a ghetto. And now folks are saying, no, that's not acceptable. And that also gets into your social determinants and equity discussions as well. But so it certainly is necessary, not necessarily easy to do.
Thanks for that. A question that somewhat piggybacks off of that, but probably even a step below, is how do you get the youth engaged in the passage of a smoke-free ordinance? How do you get that young generation, the young energy, the tech-savvy kids involved in that process?
Well, actually, Tobacco Free Living, our organization, has a youth initiative that we had at that time. It was called Defy the Lies of the Tobacco Industry. Now it is Next Era, but it's young people that are involved in tobacco prevention and control, and knowing that they do not want to have exposure to secondhand smoke. They do not like the tobacco industry targeting them as replacement users. And they speak out and are trained to address council members and how to talk on the benefits of smoke-free air for all and why everyone needs to be protected from the dangers of secondhand smoke, and to put their personal spin on it as a young person. Many of them have stories of family members that have died from tobacco use or even from exposure to secondhand smoke, and they don't like it and they don't want to see it, and so they're passionate and they like to get engaged in the community. And so we work with our schools across Louisiana to see what groups might be interested in becoming involved with that, and we do it through grants through our organization, and so that is one way that we were able to engage youth. Also, we have Rapides Foundation is a foundation that we have in Central Louisiana that is very influential, very successful, and they have initiatives throughout many of the high schools within the region. They are in Central Louisiana, so we're very lucky to have them. It's not statewide presence, but they do a lot of investigative work on health and promote and have great ads and commercials and so forth for cessation. They're very, very involved in our community. And they have youth programs that partner with us. So we actually have a couple of great resources for getting our youth involved.
The Rapides Foundation also holds an annual youth summit, and they invite 300 youth leaders, and one of the big focuses of that is tobacco use.
Great. When working at the macro level, how do you coordinate evaluation at both the local and macro level?
Talking about local and state level, I'm imagining. Okay. Well, one of the things that we did that I showed in the slide is that even though the village of McNairy has a population of 200 people, it still adds to the number of Louisianans covered overall and helps us get to that 20%. And of course, every single municipality that chooses to go 100% smoke-free, we add that population, so more and more Louisiana residents are covered at the state level. Also, I will say that when there is work to be done at the state level, we obviously would love Louisiana to be 100% smoke-free at the state level. And so the work that we do at the municipal level, at the local level, is really, really important to show that our smaller communities and our cities across Louisiana are choosing to be comprehensively smoke-free, and that gives conversation to those state partners that are talking to legislators and policymakers at the state level of how other Louisianans want to see our state become 100% smoke-free.
Well, the other thing is that ultimately you want the tobacco use to decline. And so we want our numbers or percentages of smokers or tobacco users to actually decrease at some time, just as you would be interested in infant mortality or any other STDs.
Which is a good segue into my next question, last couple of questions before we close this out. Do you guys have any experience in working with electronic health records and the embedding of tobacco cessation in electronic health records? Mr. Holcomb. Hey.
Yes. Well,
yeah, definitely his question.
Well, the Office of Public Health, for many years did not have electronic health records, and some years ago we implemented them. And this is a challenge for those of you who are healthcare providers in the room or else, out there somewhere. This is a challenge. But right from the onset, there were some decisions made about the smoking. So we incorporated the Ask Every Time policy. So every person that comes through the Office of Public Health, and we still do a lot of direct care services in Louisiana, unlike many states, but we do a lot. We see 56,000 people a year in central Louisiana alone. And every one of those people, when they come in, every time is asked, are they smoking? Do they smoke? And if they answer yes, the minimum intervention is referral to the state quit line. So we actually have things on the wall that you rip off and you actually give to the patient and say, this is, you know. And the Rapides Foundation also has a resource where you can actually send people for tobacco cessation if they're willing, though our follow-up rates for that are really abysmal. So that was incorporated in from the onset, and we can actually query the number of smokers that are coming in, or how many people are smoking, etc. So it was actually considered in the construction of the electronic health record.
Out of curiosity, which electronic health record system are you using?
Can I say that? Because that's all proprietary stuff. I mean, we use Success EHS, but there are many available, and all of them can do that. You know, so you just have to make sure it's focused. Now, what you can do, that our system doesn't do, is you can actually incorporate other tobacco information or tobacco-related information that's actually generated immediately at the time of discharge, you know, from the clinic. So there's other things that you can actually do. And we see about 85% Medicaid patients, 15% or 10% uninsured. We see a very vulnerable population that it has higher than state average.
Great. So lastly, if you guys can just close out, if you guys can give us just a 30-second important take-home. Each of you could just use 30 seconds and give the audience a take-home for what they really need to be thinking about when putting these coalitions together.
Jennifer, you're the specialist.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start. Mainly that the quote, never doubt that a small group of people can change the world. Even if there is a small core, it's a place to start and to just stick with it and not give up. I know one of the questions is, what do you do when you burn out or hit a wall? Take a minute, re-educate, stay in it, and that inspiration will come. That actually happened to me throughout the process. So just stay with it and know that success will come.
Thank you, Jennifer. Dr.
Through perseverance.
Well, the only thing I'd add is, you know, yes, it doesn't require hundreds of people to do this. It requires a few that are educated and committed and articulate, and that also will check their egos at the door so that successes will be shared by everybody and not by specific individuals. And so avoid the siloing and the conflicts that go along with collaborative type activities. And that sounds easy, and it's incredibly difficult. So that's my...
I really want to thank you both for a very lively, engaging, and very comprehensive discussion on this topic. I really want to thank the audience for participating in this discussion. The video for this will be made available within the next 48 hours, and you will get an email reminder of this. And again, thank you both, Jennifer Gilchrist and Dr. David Holcomb.
Thank you for having us. It was a pleasure and much an honor. Thank you.
Best of luck to everybody.